Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited for today's video because it is currently fall time. So many videos of people recommending their books they're reading for fall or books they think that would be perfect to add to your fall TBRs. I love watching them, and so today I thought I would recommend some books that I think are perfect to read during fall and that I think you would get the most enjoyment or connection to in the fall time. Most of these are high or urban fantasies, and I just think they're very underrated or not talked about. So I hope you can find a book that you are excited about to add to your fall TBR. All these books I have read, but I am planning to do a video where I talk about books that are on my radar for fall that I'm excited to read, so that video will hopefully be coming very soon. Let's get into the recommendation. We must sip. I didn't know they had pumpkin frozen coffee because I can't drink Dunkin' coffee. It sensitive tummy. I don't know why, but Dunkin' frozen coffee does not bother me. Please leave your fall recommendation books that you're planning to read for fall, especially mystery and thrillers, because as I'm looking at this list, I have no mystery thrillers, and it's still a genre I'm not well versed in. So if you have any beginner books or tips that you think could get me into genre of mysteries, thrillers, or anything adjacent to that, please let me know. I'm always open to hearing your suggestions. Also, before I start, I just want to say, even though the St. Martin's Press boycott has officially ended, I am not planning to really promote a lot of their books on my page, but if I do, it's going to be from their POC offers that they are aligned with, so I can get traction to book from POC offers under that imprint and to promote diversity. I do have one book from St. Martin's Press. I don't plan on really promoting them as much until their actions are more in depth with what they're planning to do. A better, more safe space for their influencers and offers in marginalized communities. So the first book I have to recommend is a historical fantasy series that I started in July of 2022, and the reason why this was on my radar back then was because it was compared to Six of Crows, the dynamic and the plot of the fantasy, but it is very different from Six of Crows, but I still love it all the same. I know this book has mixed reviews on people expecting something out of it like Six of Crows, and I think that does such a disservice to the story. But if you are into historical fantasy with connections to art history, I think you would really enjoy this, and that is The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi, and this has a ton of representation. It's a historical fantasy that consists of these 6 people going on a heist to get historical artifacts from this museum, and you see their dynamic with each other and the relationships and everything. But I love the way the magic system is connected to historical artifacts, and I just love the characters and the relationships, and it's more of a mystery puzzle aspect. Each character stands so well on their own and brings something to the dynamic of the team and the characters. This is a trilogy, so I do have to read the final book, but I rated this book a 4-star when I read it. I'm excited to hopefully read the final book in the trilogy very, very soon, but I've heard that one is so sad and will break you. Roshani Chokshi is a beautiful writer. This series is super underrated. Next book I have is also historical fantasy, but it's more of a slow burn, also connected to art history, but the first time I read this, and it recently came out about 2 weeks ago, is The Temptation of Magic by Megan Scott. I have a very special connection to this book because this is my first ever physical art copy I got sent in the mail, and it was just such a euphoric, weird feeling for me to be able to get an arc before the release date. It just gave me all the fall vibes. It's set in a coastal university town. The coffee shops and the magic and the way the world is described is definitely giving cozy, intricate community vibes. This book is about Nicole, who is an art history student, and she is hoping to uncover some history about certain paintings connected to her university as a way to uncover certain magical history secrets that pertain to her and her family and clues that her mother left before she died. There's these creatures called Imperials that can basically transform into whatever creature they're taught to hunt. Nicole herself is an Imperial, but she's been taught to fear what's inside of her as a killer. But you also see her meet another Imperial that she's supposed to hate. Even though this does have romance in it, the romance is so naturally paced, and you see them work together and confront each other's biases and history, and it doesn't feel rushed at all. This can get very graphic at times, so I would say if you don't like gore or physical violence or anything like that, I would check content warnings, but this was just very perfect. If you like academia setting, magic system connected to like humanistic world and like a slower paced fantasy, I think you would really enjoy this. I really did. I think the writing is fantastic, and I can't wait to continue the rest of the series when it comes out. Next book is How to Bite Your Neighbor and Win a Wager by Dee and Bryn. I got this copy from Rainbow Crate, which is an independent book box that focuses on LGBT authors and stories. Wouldn't have found out about this book if it wasn't for them. Also, this edition of the cover is so stunning. This is a vampire romance. It's about, yes, Vincent and Wesley. Vincent is a vampire. The way vampire and the magic of vampires is described in here is almost in a way as like a disability and the effects of that and like chronic illness, and I really liked how that was written into the story. We have Wesley, whose mother has recently died due to this organization that he believes killed her. We have Vincent, in order to survive and make money for himself, uses blood from humans as a way to get to this organization, and so he often bites people in their sleep without them knowing. That consensual issue is like talked about very early on. These characters are aware of it and they are confronted with it, and it's just not something that's brushed off, and I really liked the development of these characters, their relationship to each other. It's also fairly short. If you like vampire romance, this one gives all the spooky vibes, but also this cover is gorgeous. Now, I've been seeing this series get so much hype recently on TikTok and the book community, and I'm so happy because this was the first ever fantasy series I read when getting back into reading. I had no prior experience in fantasy, and now seeing this series get so much love and people reading it because of the anniversary editions make me so happy. And that is an Ember in the Ashes series by Sabaa Tahir. Technically, I think you can read this like in the fall, winter, any month of the year. I think fall is like the perfect time to start the series. Air, which is a spin-off in the Ember world, is coming out very soon, and I'm so excited. I'm meeting Sabaa for her book tour at the end of the month. I love this series so much. Basically, we follow Laya, who has recently lost her grandparents after they were attacked by a raid of the Empire's like soldiers. They capture her brother as well, so Laya, in order to find her brother, enlists the help of the Resistance, which is like a group her parents started before they died. In order to get to her brother and to learn more about the corruption of the world, she goes in as a spy to Blackcliff Academy, which essentially trains like impressionable teens as these ruthless killers, and there's a trial aspect in them. This book does not shy away from violence and corruption and talks about racial inequity and colonialism, and it is very graphic and violent, and Sabaa does not shy away from that. So please check content warnings for this because it can get very gory and like graphic. These are some of the most multi-layered characters I've ever read about. There are moments you don't like the decisions, relationships change throughout the series and get tested, and you understand why they make the certain decisions they do to survive. It's so beautiful how these characters evolve and go through these lives. I don't know how to explain it. I think you should start the series because one, you start a new fantasy series, but two, multi-layered characters written by a POC author and military academy school, plus as a side plot of romance, but it's more focused on like politics and injustice and fighting and action. I just adore this series with my whole heart. I think you should give it a try. Next book I read last month, and I also got it from Rainbow Crate, and this was my first book by this author, and that is Infinite Alchemist by Kacen, Callender. This is a new release that came out this year, and their first delve into fantasy. This is basically like an urban fantasy set in a university setting, and if you like magic system with alchemy and humanistic aspects and the way it connects to like humanity and parts of ourselves and inside magic, then I think you would really enjoy this. It is a slower paced fantasy. I didn't mind that at all. Seeing the connections our characters have and seeing them go through these notions of finding out about the history of alchemy. This basically follows Ash, who is a transgender man, and he has always loved alchemy, practiced alchemy. Alchemy is not able to be practiced unless you have a license, but he cannot afford a license, so he practices it illegally in secret. And one day, one of of the professors of this university catches him, but instead of turning him in, he decides to have Ash help him with finding like the main alchemy book that's been hidden for years. This book features a transgender character, also a gender fluid character, so throughout the book, Ramsey, who is the gender fluid character, their pronouns change throughout the book to like highlight how they present themselves that day, and it also features a polyamorous relationship. So I really loved all the representation in here. If you watch anime, talking about alchemy gives me Fullmetal Alchemist vibes. Next book I read last year. This is an urban fantasy. I think it's the first in a duology. Charlie, who is a 16-year-old below the waist amputee, and he is a seer after a near-death experience causes him to see like spirits and ghosts. But one of the conflicts of having this ability to see spirits all throughout the town, York and London, there are things called death loops that essentially, if you get trapped in one, you can experience someone's death if they're still connected to the town as your own, and you can forget where you are and who you are. He has to keep this from everyone who knows him. I love the disability era. One day when he has another almost near-death experience, he gets saved. Sam also enlists help of Charlie because they realize certain things are happening in the town from the spirits, and so they work together to figure out what's going on. And I just love the way ghosts were described in this book, and I loved all the representation. This book ends in a way where you don't need to pick up the second book, but if you want to, you can. If you don't want to commit to like a long series, you just want like a solo book, I feel like this book ends on a perfect place where you don't feel like you need to read more if you don't want to. It features a bunch of queer characters, but it can get very graphic with violence at times, so please check content warnings. I read this next one in June of this year, very recently, and it is The Fall That Saved Us by Tamara, Jeree. And look at this cover. It is also a Rainbow Crate edition, Sapphic Angel/Angel Hunter romance, and it follows our main character Cecile as she wants to live in the human world to like disconnect from her abusive family. There are heavy depictions and graphic conversations around abuse, eating disorders, emotional abuse, physical abuse, like just control and toxic family relationships, but the way it is dealt with, the healing process of it is so well done, and you just really feel for our character. But I would say if any of that is like not a good place for you to be in right now, I would say please check content warnings. The author has them on her website if you want to look more in depth. She meets this succubus named Abitu to claim her soul as a mission, her organization, and along the way they end up falling for each other, and it's just such a sweet romance with a lot of healing and understanding and healthy communication and love. Also, our main character runs a bookstore, so if you're looking for those cozy vibes, I think you would like this. And becoming your own person outside of what you've been taught and trained to be in your family. Read this if you want a cute little romance with a little bit of heavier topics. The next book is my second favorite book of all time that I've read this year. It's The Spirit Bears Its Teeth by Andrew Joseph White. This was probably my most surprising read of 2024 so far, essentially because it's a historical fantasy horror. It's horror. It's not like edge of your seat horror. It's more like horror of what's happening to our characters, but as one of my all-time favorite main characters, in the way Andrew writes about life and history in this book is done with so much respect and detail. This book follows Silas, who was born with purple eyes, and a lot of people in this community who are born with purple eyes can be sold off as wives to people and gain like a sum of money, but Silas doesn't want that. Silas, throughout this book, is referred to by their dead name, so if that is something that is triggering to you or something you are not able to deal with, maybe check content warnings for this. Also, it is very graphic. It's graphic in the way of like the horror and the violence that happens with our characters. The author even says in the beginning of the book, in such a delicate manner, that not everyone can read this book, and if you need to take a break, worry about your own mental health instead of reading this, they totally understand. But the way it is done is so beautiful and heartfelt, but also hopeful and sad, and I just felt all the emotions of this. If you are looking to get into horror, I think this is the perfect place to start because it's not just full graphic horror. It has like an atmosphere It has a plot. It has fantasy, supernatural elements of spirits. It's about female rage and abuse, but it's done so articulately well. There are black pages sprinkled throughout this book every few chapters. When I made the connection of what the black pages were, I was just in awe how well a story could be cultivated. This book can get very violent. I would say please check content warnings, but I love Silas in this story with all my heart. It is based off part of history in like the eugenics movement. Silas is also autistic, so if you're looking for representation of like an autistic main character, I think this is so beautifully done. And Andrew Joseph White himself is trans and autistic, so you're reading own voices representation, which I think is so important to read. The way this book has made me feel, I have not stopped thinking about it. I read it in July, but I still look at this book and I'm like, I need to like look at the lines I underlined. I just think about this book. It's such a beautiful portrait of humanity and history. Back then, people weren't able to protect themselves, but now we have the footing to do it now. It's a hard read, but I think if you are able to read it, it's such a necessary, beautiful read. He puts a historical context note in the back saying like, because he is not a person of color, he didn't want to talk about like the perspective of like black people and how they were treated during like eugenics and medical examinations and sterilizations. It's from a white perspective in this book. He didn't want to completely erase out that reality. If you are disabled, check content warnings because it can go into some dark history. I love this book so much. If you are looking for a book to connect to characters and just feel nauseated but like empowered at the same time, I would say this book. The last book that I am recommending for this video is none other than Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I have a very unique relationship with this series because I read the first book in November of 2022. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't really well versed in King Arthur retellings or retellings in general. This is basically an urban fantasy about a girl named Bryn, and her mother has recently died, but she really wanted to go to like this early college program at UC Davis, and her and her mother had a lot of like fights about it, and they didn't leave things on the best terms before she dies. But essentially Bryn, like trying to like reinvent herself and kind of escape her grief, gets accepted into this program. It goes through a journey of learning about the Legendborn, which is like a secret society of people who can manipulate matter in certain parts of reality. The way grief is depicted and connected to the magic system in Bryn's character arc is so well done, and it talks about history and the often uncomfortable dark parts of history in college campuses and how they treated POC people. Tracy Deonn herself went to UC Davis, so she is basically not an expert, but she has firsthand experience of being a person of color who went to this university. This is a very interesting book for me because I appreciated this book so much when I read it, but the second book, Bloodmark, I kept it off. I always wanted to like continue the series, but it was never the right time. And I always like to say right now in my reading that a book will come to you when you are ready for it. After the experiences of grief that I've been through with losing like my pet and experiencing that moment and those feelings, I connected to this series so much more. Bloodmark, the second book in this series, is one of my 5-star reads of this year, and I just really liked how that sequel took the characters and the dynamic and really like expanded on them and more of the magic system in Bryn's arc and like the legend. But I love Bryn. Bryn is one of my favorite main characters of all time. Please check content warnings for this because it has heavy depictions of grief, racism, and also like historical context, but I love this book so much. It is talked about for good reason, and I think if you are looking for more academia books in fantasy written by POC authors, I think you should try Legendborn, and I just love this story with my whole entire heart. I hope you enjoyed all those recommendations. As always, if you have any recommendations or any books you're excited to read for fall, leave them down below, and I will see you very soon. I want this to be a safe place for people of all identities here, and just know you are loved, you are cared for, and you are seen. And I always want to try to uplift and learn about as many perspectives and cultures as I can in this space and community and share my love of reading as well. I hope you found something you want to read for this fall season. I'll see you in my next video.